Next slide, please. Sorry about that. Do you need professional credits? You can receive 1 hour professional development credit by participating in this live webinar and completing the short survey at the end. Our webinars are being recorded and will be made available for those who registered. Continue your learning with these webinars all summer long. Please visit our new website at nrrarecycles.org for additional information. Next slide, please. Here's some information on our webinars. For recycling facility operators, we have our operator track webinars from which to choose from. Next slide, please. And for our educators, administrators, and community members, we have our community track webinars. We've separated our webinars according to probable interest groups, but all NRRA members and not yet members are welcome to participate in any and all of our webinar offerings. Next slide. I'd like to take the time to set the table for this GoTo webinar. Webinar participants will not be able to be heard by presenters or other participants during this presentation. If you cannot hear the presenters' voices, please click the audio arrow in your control panel and choose computer audio. If that does not work, select phone call option and follow the directions. We hope that you will all ask questions and our presenters will do their best to answer them as time allows. Click on the question block in the control panel and type in your questions. Please keep questions short and to the point. I would also like to bring your attention to the handout that's available with this webinar. This can also be found in the control console. You are welcome to view, download, or both. Next slide, please. Here's some information about the Northeast Resource Recovery Association. We are a recycling nonprofit. We have 400 members, primarily municipalities, and we were founded nearly 40 years ago. Next slide, please. So what do? We do cooperative marketing and purchasing. We enable communities to manage their own recycling programs and offer over 40 programs, including single stream and municipal solid waste. We connect sellers to recyclables to purchasers. Next slide, please. We provide education and technical assistance through workshops, facility tours, an annual conference, a school club, and of course, these summer webinars. Next slide, please. And now I would like to introduce our presenters for today. Lucy Perkins is the Sustainability Program Coordinator for the City of South Portland, Maine, and Matt Grondin is the Communications Manager at EcoMaine, based in Portland, Maine. Thank you for being with us, Lucy and Matt. On behalf of the NRRA, I'd like to welcome you to the summer webinar series and turn this presentation over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Ben, and thanks to the NRRA for having us to present this. This is an exciting project that we worked on, Eco Maine and City of South Portland, along with a few other communities last year. And we're very excited to have the opportunity to share what we learned with all of you. As Ben mentioned, I am Matt Grondin, just to put a face to a name, and I have been communications manager here at EcoMaine for about 2.5 years, overseeing our PR communications and our educational outreach. And Lucy, I'd love to turn it over to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Matt, and again, thank you, Ben and the NRRA, and thank you all who are here to listen today. I am the Sustainability Program Coordinator, as Ben mentioned, for the City of South Portland. I've been in this role for 3 years, and our office has existed for just over 5. We're one of the few offices in Maine that is a sustainability office in a municipality. We work across a number of focus areas, and a lot of our work has been in this waste reduction initiatives. And I look forward today to sharing information about our pilot and the lessons learned that can really be translated beyond Southern Maine for a challenge that transcends many of our regional boundaries.
And that's a really good way to start off who EcoMaine is. We are a regional waste management organization, including 70 communities who participate in single sort recycling and municipal solid waste programs. We have Mostly our communities are in southern and coastal Maine, but we do have a fair amount in central Maine as well, and even as far up the coast past MDI, Mount Desert Island, into Lemoyne. So we operate for these 70 communities. We process and sort about 40,000 tons of single sort recycling per year, and about 175,000 tons of municipal solid waste for our waste to energy plant. We own and operate a landfill, very unique in this regard, that it's about 2 miles down the road from our waste to energy plant, which allows us to cut down on transportation time for the ash resulting from the waste to energy process. We also have a robust education program. As I mentioned, we do have educational outreach program with 3 full-time educators serving our municipalities. And one of those great municipalities is the city of South Portland. So Lucy will talk a little bit more about South Portland specific things.
Thanks, Matt. So for those of you that aren't as familiar with the city of South Portland, just a quick background. We are made up of approximately 26,000 residents. And as I mentioned, we're one of the few cities in the state with a sustainability office. And to Matt's point about education outreach and community partnerships, our work truly thrives on these partnerships, whether they are internal within our municipality and municipal departments, with the Public Works Department, with Water Resources or Planning, but also external with community organizations and leaders like EcoMaine that have really helped us bring solutions and projects to scale. As you can see here, there are 2 ambitious climate goals that were adopted by our City Council in 2018 that are really driving the initiatives, programs, and policies across all of our municipal departments. We know these goals will require transformative change, whether they are in our energy, transportation, or our waste systems. And right now, to achieve these goals, we are in the process of developing a climate action plan that outlines specific targets and strategies. And one of these targets and strategies is specific to our waste diversion, and we hope to achieve a 90% diversion rate by 2050 through a scope of mechanisms, including expanded recycling, food waste diversion, reduction of single-use plastics, and the establishment of a circular economy. So if you could go to the next slide, Matt. Super. Both South Portland and EcoMaine have a commitment to upholding the waste hierarchy and have really engaged in initiatives across each tier. For our city, we have a polystyrene ban. We're promoting reuse through our swap shop. We're one of the first cities in the state to offer a municipal food waste program and anaerobic digestion. But today we want to focus particularly on the recycling in the waste hierarchy through an initiative that we've developed to educate our residents about the importance of recycling, but also to prevent contamination.
And I think that's a really important point. It is about education, and enforcement and education can really work hand in hand. That's our feeling at EcoMaine, and we were glad to partner with South Portland on this to really provide as solid an educational foundation as we possibly could. So I want to introduce a quick poll real quick. If you all at the NRRA could throw that up and give a chance for folks to respond. So I think we'll just give it a couple of seconds here. All right, so it looks like the results of our poll are in, and it seems like the majority of folks out there are not doing any tagging or anything like that. And so this presentation hopefully will be of some use to those folks who are not, and even the folks who do. You know, maybe there'll be the opportunity to talk about how we're all doing it and learn from each other as well. So I'm glad to see that. Thank you for participating. Our next slide is a quick look, not a very scientific look, but it's, I think, probably a pretty familiar look at things for folks on this webinar. You know, over the last 15 years or so, I think, you know, we're all pretty familiar with, you know, the revenue from recycling has really gone down as a result of a few things, mostly having to do with China and the national sword restrictions in the past few years. But as the rate of contamination went up, there was this tolerance from China, who was buying these materials at a premium, and so the allowance, I guess, for contamination was going up the entire time. And so we're looking at this picture here. And you know, it really is unfortunate that you know, we're in this situation where the cost of recycling has increased so much. You know, because over the last 15 years, it's a strategy that has really been the most efficient and most economical, not to mention environmental, way of dealing with solid waste. You know, over the last 15 years, pictured here, we've at EcoMaine had more than 500,000 tons of single sort recycling diverted away from landfills and into the marketplace. This saved more than $35 million for our communities. So we're in this situation now with China's withdrawal from the markets. It really is a buyer's market. And you know, it's harder and harder sometimes to stay more committed to recycling. But we're doing just that. So we did start a campaign called "Which Bin Does It Go In?" Back in 2018, and we wanted to, you know, leverage our educational investment to clean up contamination. We did that through a number of things, including earned media, paid media, so news stories and advertisements. Social media obviously is a huge one right now, and you know, we conduct in-person outreach and tours. Presentations, those have obviously been curtailed during the pandemic, but our education, it really is a unique focus for us in our fight against contamination. And that's, you know, important now more than ever, because the evolving ton, as we call it, you know, we're transitioning over the course of these last 15 years from laundry detergent, for example, coming in a box, you know, powder in a box, to a liquid in a jug. But now, you know, it's lightweighting of packaging. It's transportation needs that are lightweighting these materials into pods and pouches. So we're seeing, you know, a recycling effort that is you know, seeing these transitions in packaging, and you know, so we need to be able to keep up with our education, and that's what EcoMaine does invest in. You know, the same is true for delivery packages. Sure, there's still a whole lot of cardboard boxes from Amazon and food delivery companies and so on, but you know, more and more you're getting shirts and pouches and bags and things like that. So it all leads to the need for more education, because people generally do want to do the right thing. They just need to know. And so we believe in the carrot over the stick. We talk a lot about this, and working as a municipally based, municipally owned rather, nonprofit, it's really not in our best interest to use enforcement as much. You know, we've worked over the course of 30 years to really instill these single sort recycling programs and to get people and municipalities on board. You know, we don't want to be turning off folks from participating in this important process. And so wherever we can, we really do tend to stick with the carrot, so to speak. So I'll turn it back over to Lucy to talk about this pilot project we did last year.
Thanks, Matt. Do you quickly want to launch that other poll question before we dive in?
Yes, I do. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
So we'll give folks a few seconds here to answer the second poll question on contamination rates.
Great, thank you all for answering that. What really drove the creation and origin of this recycling outreach pilot was the recognition that we were seeing our contamination rates increase and stay at a higher level over the past few years. And there was difference among neighborhoods within the community, but overall we were seeing upwards of 25–26% contamination, some neighborhoods even as high as 80%. And this was starting to cost the city more with additional contamination fees, which is really what created the outreach pilot. So before we dive into the details and what it looked like, I just want to give a quick overview sort of how it came to be. There was a pilot before the pilot per se, before we came together with these other communities and Eco Maine to develop the recycling outreach pilot. We worked internally with an intern that we hired and a community partner to tag bins in one neighborhood of the city that had that highest contamination rate. It was a summer-long effort. We learned a lot from the process, and that those lessons learned really improved and impacted what we will roll out and share today. For the broader context, not only was South Portland at this time seeing higher contamination rates, but our neighbors in Scarborough, Falmouth, and Windham were also dealing with contamination and higher contamination fees. We were facing pressure from city councils or leaders and decision makers to address the contamination. And as I mentioned, we were facing higher costs. The city of South Portland projected that we might have to spend an additional $100,000 on these contamination fees. So together, we designed a pilot project, sort of seeing economies of scale and sharing best practices. And our goal was really very simple: to select routes that worked in our communities for this project, which we felt had movable rates of contamination, and to reduce those rates through tagging and education. If you could go to the next slide, Matt. Great.
Great. So just to talk a little bit about EcoMaines' role in this, we are municipally owned in South Portland and these other communities that we worked with are owner communities of Eco Maine. So it really was a nice natural fit for all of us to be working together. Eco Maine's specific role was really to leverage our educational outreach and PR investments, and so I talked a little bit about those earlier. We are in a good position to be able to use those capacities to create and print resources, to go out and to get that earned media. And so a couple of examples on your screen right now. We used, with some help from our friends at the Recycling Partnership and the Mass DEP, these OOPS tickets, green, yellow, and red, so the traffic light signal, which most of us are familiar with, I think, these days. So green tags, people would be vying for these green tags to get those, and but sometimes a few items would be tagged yellow, so if they had a couple of plastic bags in there or styrofoam, and red is really just reserved for the trash. So we're talking about straight up bags of trash or just loose trash in some cases. And those red tags wouldn't be picked up. We worked with our hauling companies to ensure that we could leave those right at the curb. So there was a real consequence to getting a red tag. But we also supported these with ways to get more information, to do the right thing. As I mentioned, people want to do the right thing. These are not folks who are illegally dumping, I think, in most cases. So, we provided resources like our do and don't list. We have a great tool called the Recyclopedia, which is a mobile app and a online database. So folks can look up any one of more than 1,300 items to find out where they need to dispose that item. So giving people solutions and the information to do the right thing is really important. So that's part of what Ecomaine did. Ecomaine also was involved really with training the interns. So it's great to have interns who can do the job of tagging red, yellow, and green. It's even better when they know why. They understand the conversations that they'll need to have with residents, which we gave to them through a week-long, actually a little more than a week-long training effort. So we even had them on our lines in our recycling facility, hand sorting, looking in drop-off containers. So this is a program that can work for drop-off locations as well. I want to point that out. And we trained them in what's called community-based social marketing as well. It's kind of the theory that seeing your friends or neighbors and peers act in a certain way, it creates an internalized incentive to change your behavior. And so that's kind of what recycling as a whole is built on. Your neighbor is putting their blue cart out every week. You want to make sure that you're doing the right thing as well. And recycling is one of those things that does benefit from community-based social marketing. And in the end, this again, earned media really did result last year. We got a great word of mouth, neighborhood to neighborhood, and then also the media really did take notice as well. We had quite a few news stories resulted that just kind of amplified that word of mouth as well. So all these things, Ecomaine is in a great position to regionalize the effort and help leverage the efforts that the municipalities are making. Lucy, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Matt. That's a great overview. And to follow on that point, we really feel like this project works successfully because of the partnerships and the role that each of us played to build upon our strengths and our profile in the shared ecosystem. And as I mentioned before, it was again a regional approach because contamination is a shared issue across the 4 municipalities and others that were participating in the program. And by coming together, we were able to leverage some shared resources and best practices to address a common issue really creatively and with positive spirit, and provide economies of scale that really built a strong project team. So now just talking about, well, what was the municipality's role in putting this project together? While we were working in collaboration to design and build resources, we were also responsible for several key tasks independently of one another. First, that meant gaining internal buy-in, communicating with our own staff, whether it was in the Public Works Department or the Finance Department, to demonstrate the potential impact of the project and savings. We were then tasked, once we got a green light, tasked with hiring the interns, starting with developing and posting a job description, conducting the interviews, and managing internal onboarding. We each searched for funding for these positions. Some found it in operating budgets. Some also found additional grant funding to support the positions. We were then tasked, once we were getting all the people together, with identifying the appropriate routes. So you can see in the bottom right here, this is a snapshot of one of the pilot neighborhoods that we covered. To determine which neighborhoods we focused on, we did an initial data analysis to identify where there were areas of particularly high contamination. We then further analyzed those areas for the walkability and efficiency on behalf of the interns, the ability to retrieve those addresses from an assessor's database develop data collection sheets. And then it was really important, we coordinated with our haulers to understand their timing when they covered that route, when they emptied and collected bins, so we could coordinate our walking and tagging prior to that collection, and even so follow the trucks to Eco Maine to watch the contamination feed be assessed. We then prepared additional resources. On the top, you'll see a data collection form with the street, the cart, the tag number, and we also tracked common contaminants so we could target social media and outreach accordingly. We were invested in the students' development and professional development as well, so we created self-reflection and evaluation forms to be completed at the beginning and end of the project to track their growth and their learning. And the municipalities also coordinated any direct mailings that we sent to homes to alert them of the program or provide updates. Some of the cities and towns had fun doing Which Bin Wednesday social media posts or writing news articles that shared the progress of the program. And then I think what was the most fun was we just supported the interns on a day-to-day basis. As you can see from the photo, we took the job incredibly seriously, but we really had a lot of fun in weekly check-ins where we would troubleshoot or just update one another and solve issues together, as many of them were recurring or happening across different cities. And we really just approached this with positive energy. It wasn't meant to be punitive. We were really out there to educate and improve. So if you could go to the next slide, Matt. Super. So as Matt mentioned earlier, the project began with a very robust intern training. It was between 1 and 2 weeks, which was an improvement from the pilot before the pilot that we did in South Portland, where we really only had 1 or 2 days, and that came out in the statistical significance of the data. By intentionally providing the students with a robust training program, we were really able to prepare them well for tagging on their own when they were out in the community. You know, it started with familiarizing them with the global changes in the recycling market, the local impacts of those changes on our waste stream. As Matt mentioned, they were on the sorting line. They learned important skills in data collection, the basics of recycling, but also community outreach and to build confidence interacting with neighbors or residents when they are out tagging the bins. We then followed up that initial training with a weekly curriculum and meetings, as Matt mentioned, focused on community-based social marketing. Also in those meetings, they shared their own updates from the week, they problem solved, and they worked together to prepare for a final presentation for the city councils. And if anything, I think what mostly came out of those curriculum meetings and trainings was that there was significant camaraderie among the different communities, and the students really built relationships with one another that I think fostered great energy in the program that translated to each interaction they had with the residents, with media, with us as leaders, and really put a great face to this program. So day by day, what did this look like? We were hitting the pavement, and by we, the students worked incredibly hard. Each day they would start very early, probably around 6 a.m. and get out ahead of the trucks and walk bin to bin in the neighborhood. They would open the bin, assess the visible contamination, and then mark it on the data collection sheet that you see here in the middle. It was really important to establish a system that was comparable and standardized, and it allowed the interns to get into a rhythm and move quickly and efficiently while still trusting their decision making. The sheet as it was built also allowed us to track improvement and notice patterns week to week. We also took safety very seriously. As you can see, the image of one of the interns on the left, we prepared them with proper protocols. We gave them highlighter yellow safety vests. We conducted a safety training for them, provided them with business cards, and as I mentioned before, techniques for talking with any disgruntled residents. And we also had them go out in pairs. Not only did it make it more fun and efficient and safe, but it allowed them to move quickly throughout the community. And then finally, on the right, that's a screenshot of the recyclopedia that Matt mentioned. We ensured that they were equipped with resources that they needed to answer questions on the fly for themselves or for residents. So they carried those data sheets, they carried do-don't cards, and they used the recyclopedia if there were any items they were unsure about. We're really excited that this year, as we replicate the program, we're going to move away from the paper data collection, which did prove problematic in the rain, and just added additional tasks as they translated that data from a paper sheet to the computer. We're going to be using an iPad and a Google form to track the data and really save a lot of time and maybe remove potential human error. So we're excited about that evolution of the program. So as we got rolling, this was an 8-week pilot. The program received overwhelmingly positive responses from our community members and our leaders. And the interns really built strong and positive relationships with the residents as they visited them weekly. These are 4 quotes, but I'm just going to pull out some themes from the quotes and feel free to read them as I go. The first was that the residents reflected on how they learned the basics, just the basics of how recycling works and the path of recycling in our community. Whether it was something as simple as knowing that there were 2 compartments on the truck and that recycling went in one side and trash went in the other. So that's why it was important to have a clean recycling load, to learning the path of recycling and where it goes after it leaves the curb. Knowing these things can really clarify the importance of proper recycling and proper recycling practices. There was also a really surprising drive to do it right. Once we announced the program and sent mailers to each home, we had residents calling and coming to our office in search of do-don't cards so they would be able to put the proper item in the right bin. There was some fun competition that happened. Households wanted to do better week by week, compare themselves to neighbors, and this was really reinforced by those visible tags on the bins at the point of action of proper recycling. And finally, we really made it lighthearted, and that was reflected in some of the words of our community members. People had fun with the program, and it really built a sense of pride in their household and their neighborhood and their community, and the impact of that change was visible. And one anecdote too is we gave the interns July 4th off that whole week, and we had a number of residents call our office saying, where are the interns? I was looking for them today and they didn't come. So there was fantastic receptivity and excitement among the residents to really engage and interact and learn from the work of these interns. So by the numbers, here's a quick summary of the program in South Portland. And as I go through, I'm going to note how this differed community by community, because you can amend and really make this a flexible format to fit your local context. So in South Portland, we hired 4 interns. The other communities hired 2. That's really contingent upon your capacity to manage or the financial resources that may be available. In doing so, we were able to cover 4 neighborhoods. And what we did was we did 4 weeks at each neighborhood. So we sort of split up the 8 weeks into 2 parts. Some other communities spent just the full 8 weeks intensely on a certain neighborhood. You can sort of slice it any way to meet the needs of the community and the impact that you're seeing. We covered almost 2,300 households throughout the program. That's a lot, and that was contingent upon the fact that we focused just on the households. Some of the other participating municipalities also spent some time at the transfer station monitoring and managing the silver bullets. So that's another option and way that you can change the program to fit your community. And the program cost us more because we had more interns, almost $10,000. I think for other communities, it was about half that. And most of that went into the interns. Some other costs are the tagging that we paid for, the red, yellow, and green tags that EcoMaine helped us order. So again, this can really vary across communities, and we encourage you to be creative and think and sort of be analytical about how you're running the program to best fit the needs of your community. So here's a look at the impact, and I'm just going to go through this quickly because I know Matt had some fantastic stats for you all on the next slide. But the big takeaway is it worked. And in each community where we participated and ran the program, we saw roughly a 5% reduction in contamination citywide. And I think what's important to take away from that is not only did the work of the interns impact the bins in the neighborhoods they were walking, but the word spread to neighborhoods that were not covered in the pilot program, and people really got on board, and we saw a citywide reduction in our contamination rates. So the end of the program, after 8 weeks, the students were really proud of their work. We were proud of the impact they had brought to the community. And you can see on the right here, these are the interns we had in South Portland. In each community, they finished with a presentation to the city council or to elected leadership or city officials to share what they had learned, to provide recommendations to the city to make changes or outreach that would be impactful based on common contaminants that they saw. And this was really a highlight for all of them and for us, and teed up further interest in the region to replicate this model or to repeat it in the following summer.
Thanks, Lucy. And, you know, I think, again, I have alluded to this before. You know, we at Ecomaine are kind of the regional go-to for waste management strategies. You know, I think Lucy touched on it well when she said, you know, each community did what was right for their community. I think that you know, we're fine to be the waste management experts, but each community really did know its own neighborhoods and staff and capabilities. So I thought that was really important to note. In addition to the presentations that each of the intern groups did, we also pulled together this infographic you see on your left-hand side of the screen. And we all worked together to have an informational session for other municipal staff who didn't participate but may be interested in the future. And we've had some luck in communities going forward with their own sort of a project like this as well. You know, and as Lucy said, the project worked. I mean, it's an average of 5% reduction in contamination was across all 4 towns, not just the specific routes that we were working on. You know, saving thousands of dollars per municipality, and the fact that you know, it worked so well that some of the communities could switch routes halfway through just points to, I think, a really good receptive audience and a really positive campaign. So in learning all of this, you know, we did go ahead and prepare a toolkit at the end of the project, and I'm happy to share that with all of you today. I'll kind of skim through these in brief, but at the end of this, if you'd like to contact us for access to the toolkit, we would be thrilled to share it. So. And I see a question coming in about languages and a separate one about multifamily units. So I want to tackle both of those real quick. Just to say that Ecomaine does have a selection of its materials available in French, Spanish, and Arabic, which are kind of the top 3. But for this year, we're actually working on expanding that to be a top 10. In addition to having French, Spanish, and Arabic, you know, languages like Portuguese and Somali and other languages are, you know, really broadly spoken in Portland, South Portland school systems. So we thought it would be beneficial to have those available as well. But really, I think that we focused on having materials that are available that are pictographic more than anything. You know, the images can really go a long way in transcending that language barrier. And in addition, multifamily units are hard. I don't think there's any real way to get around that. Certainly some of the routes we have this year and that we had last year are multifamily units. You know, we have had the good luck to work with some of the property managers and get them on board. And you know, in the cities, some of the city's codes here, the property manager or the landlord are really tasked with overseeing that. So it is tough. I'll acknowledge that. No one wants to be the one to give a citation to a property owner. From time to time, it'll, you know, probably need to be out there as an option. But I think that's it's admittedly a tough one to tackle. So we do our best with that. And I think, Lucy, if you wanted to tackle any of that as well, I would invite that.
Yeah, those great answers there, Matt. I think just to echo your point on the pictographic images, those have been really helpful. And we have translated a number of resources as well. As for multifamily, right now in South Portland, the city doesn't provide recycling services to multifamily residents of 3 or more. But we know in order to reach that goal diversion rate and internal recycling rate targets that we have over the next 5 years or so, we plan to be addressing and expanding those services, not from the city, but to require multifamily and apartment building complexes to provide recycling services. So that's on our radar. A number of neighboring communities have a similar ordinance. The degree to which it's enforced differs. So we really want to figure out how we can do it right to provide not only the infrastructure, but also the education, so the residents and the property owners feel well equipped to participate in the program.
Great, thank you, Lucy. So to the toolkit, again, I'll go through this briefly, but you know, we tried to put together a packet of info that could help others to do this. So really in brief, you know, the where to start, we have our flow chart that you know, includes both curbside and drop-off locations, working in partnership with EcoMaine or with another community or multiple communities or on your own. How to communicate with your hauler and your hauling companies. You know, a sample six month timeline, it could certainly be shorter, but you know, from beginning to end, we found, you know, planning, recruiting, hiring, training to the very end presentation, you know, was about 6 months in the end, and you know, I think to make a big difference, it really did help to have that time. Section 2 was planning for the position. So we tried to lay out, you know, a sample job description, for example, examples for curriculum design, how much it would cost. Lucy mentioned their costs were about $10,000. You know, Scarborough, Falmouth, and Wyndham's were about half that. But it's really important to know this information going in. So we thought it made sense to make that available, and really clearly delineating roles and responsibilities as well. You know, so what Ecomaine would be responsible for, what South Portland would be responsible for, and what the hauler would be responsible for, in addition to the intern's day-to-day duties. So we have documents on all of those in our toolkit. One of the big things at Ecomaine in our mission even is about increasing public awareness. So we took this part very seriously. We worked with the communities to send out letters and postcards. Even lawn signs were kind of put in the ground around affected neighborhoods. As I mentioned, we did get a lot of media attention, which was fantastic. We worked on press releases. Not just at the beginning, not just at the end, but throughout the project to work with our local media outlets. And of course, social media, especially in the communities and, you know, on community pages and boards where people communicate, frankly, and that word of mouth is really important. So setting the location, we have information on how to best do that. Certainly the tracking sheet is available in the toolkit as well. As Lucy mentioned, we are moving toward a Google form this year, but ultimately, you know, we're still tracking that data in a spreadsheet populated by the form. And so, you know, while it's easier to do the data entry, we're still going to be tracking that, you know, those trends through a spreadsheet in the end. And really, you know, safety was key for us. Working with the municipalities to make sure that that folks were visible and branded, you know, in a company car or municipal car, for example, was important. But you know, those interactions, we made sure that the interns were really comfortable saying, you know, this is something that's out of my depth, and I'm going to refer you to Matt or Lucy or the appropriate municipal contact. We really wanted this to be an educational process, both for the residents and the interns. speaking of lessons learned, we learned many of them, and we'd love to share them with you. You know, these are just a couple of examples, but we do have a pretty pretty robust section on lessons learned. And this came from both what we learned at Eco Maine, at what the municipalities learned, but also it provided the interns a chance to give feedback and say, you know, we saw more napkins and paper towels than we did styrofoam, for example. That's not exactly true, but just for the sake of example, they had the opportunity to say, you know, we should update this form to say X, Y, or Z. You know, these are the things that we saw, and I think that provided value to their experience as well. Certainly, frequently asked questions are included in the toolkit as well. Section 6 is really just our contact information, so I'll skip over that and go right to number 7. Which is our appendix on community-based social marketing. I mentioned earlier, it's sort of almost a peer pressure approach to behavior change, and it's proved to be a really important collaboration with the University of Southern Maine on this front, and so the interns were able to get a little background in that area as well, and certainly it was valuable for us. So that is our toolkit. You know, I think we would love to be able to share it. You know, it's really a labor that's ongoing, I would say. We are working on this project again this year. And you know, we would love to share the toolkit with anybody who's interested in it. And certainly as it evolves, there'll be more and more information available as we continue on with South Portland and with other communities. So with that, I will go right into our questions portion. I think I see a question about a hospital. Working in a hospital, we have numerous departments recycling. How can we get the message across that contamination is not okay? That is a great question. And Lucy, I'll tackle it first. If you have thoughts on it, I would love it if you jump in. We actually work with a few hospitals on that right now, and we have done some really intensive training with certain departments. We've you know, singled out some leadership departments, I would say, in some of the hospitals in Portland here, for example. To kind of lead the way for other departments. Signage and labeling is just, it is enormous, I would say. You know, to really replicate what, you know, in a break room, for example, what are the most common materials you're seeing? Post that sign right above the trash and recycling bins in your common areas. If it's an office setting, obviously that's going to be a lot more paper and, you know, paper clips and things like that. So making it count toward, or making it reflective of what the materials you're using in that space is really important. We have in one of our communities here that we partnered with last summer, Falmouth has a great do and don't board that actually incorporates the physical items onto a big poster board. So that she's got a plastic bag just pasted right onto a poster board on the don't side. Maybe that's something that's doable for a break room setting or for an office setting. So I would encourage, you know, to look through departments that are really leaders in that area. Have, you know, if you have the opportunity to have education done for the hospitals, certainly reach out and do that. Provide signage, and you know, contamination, frankly, is a message that I think translates well to a hospital. I mean, you know, if you get things that don't belong in a certain stream, obviously there are far more dire consequences in a hospital than there are at a recycling facility most often. So I would try and use that analogy.
That's super, Matt. You took many of the words out of my mouth. The only thing I would add too is if there are departments that are leading, but you're working in another one, maybe you can find an internal champion within your department itself, someone to carry the torch and share the message, as we did through this program, really being positive, not punitive, and to the impact of those signs right over the bin, really communicating at the point of action where someone is making a decision about what bin does this item go in. That's where the learning really happens. So to save words, I think that was just really well done, Matt. There's another question here about what community-based social marketing elements we incorporate into our efforts. One of the communities, I think following the program, and this was a recommendation from our students, was to launch a community pledge, to have community members sign a pledge that says, I commit to recycling properly, or I commit to recycling this certain item. And that really develops a sense of personal ownership. If you can demonstrate and share how that pledge ripples and is spread across the community, there's a potential for a really wider impact. So that was one of the examples that we had. I don't know if you're aware of others, Matt, too.
No, I think that was the best example that I think we saw, but you know, in providing just simply providing the tags, you know, we heard neighbors talking between themselves, as was pointed out earlier, to kind of drum up that that competitive neighborhood spirit almost. Was in and of itself a useful tool. I do see another question, a newly hired recycling coordinator with a 27% contamination rate. Thoughts on whether this is something I can get started on my own, or how many employees do you need? Does it need a team? I would say ideally the investment, you know, is one that's made by the organization to have an investment in staff, at least on a part-time basis. For example, this year we're at EcoMaine employing the interns ourselves, just to you know, keep that that cost burden over here. So I think that's important, but I think there are also a number of other ways that we can do this work. You know, some communities have a solid waste or recycling committee. Perhaps there are ways to get volunteers involved. Whatever the case might be, I think it is important for the folks who are doing the actual work, to have buy-in from the city or town, and to have the authority behind them to do the work. I think that's a really important thing. You know, they may not be the be-all end-all. They may need to hand over a business card to answer more disgruntled questions or harder questions, but I think having the authority behind them is an important point. Lucy? Yes,
I would also add there is reason to go multiple times to one household. So I know one of the local haulers, they themselves organized a blitz in a community where they spent a day tagging bins, and it wouldn't make sense in a normal route to have the driver get out and tag the bin. So they sort of did this big collective volunteer effort on one specific collection day, which works. But I would also encourage you to think about if there's a way that you can visit a household more than once, so you can help them improve and track that improvement, which does lend itself to hiring an intern or having a part-time staff member. It's a couple hours in the morning to do the tagging, depending on when your collection happens, and maybe an hour or so on the back end for data entry. But I think if anything, that time is really well spent. There are financial savings that come from that investment, and really demonstrating that impact, as Matt said, to city officials and leaders within your municipality is really important. But there are a lot of ways you can shape this program to fit the needs of your community, and even just if it's, as we mentioned, if it's in a pilot area, the impacts ripple farther throughout the city itself.
Terrific. I'll give a last second for any additional questions. I think we're just about at the end of our time. If there are any, I guess, get them in ASAP. But otherwise, I will turn it back over to our friends at the NRRA. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lucy and Matt. What a wonderful presentation today. I really enjoyed the presentation and the program as well. It's great that you got so much inclusion with the community in the young people, I think that makes for a wonderful program, successful program. So once again, being mindful of time, I'd like to thank Lucy and Matt for joining us today. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for the summer webinar series. We'd like to thank Interstate Refrigerant Recovery Incorporated, Schnitzer, and USDA. I want to remind everyone that the post-webinar survey will launch immediately after this webinar. It will also appear in your email box tomorrow. As a reminder, we welcome feedback. Next slide, please. Our webinar series will continue on Friday, August 14th, when Cindy Sterling, Senior Grant Manager and Educator for NRRA, Ben Parham, Education Assistant for NRRA, along with Paige Wilson, Solid Waste Manager for the Lakes Region Planning Commission, discuss medical waste disposal with needles, pharmaceuticals, vaping, and more. And then things will start back up on Wednesday, August 26th at a special Wednesday webinar time of noon to 1, when we learn about extended product responsibility with Terry Goldberg from the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association and Megan Pryor from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. Thank you all for attending and have a happy summer.